This is Tanya Lynn with the Sistership Circle podcast. From spirituality, sexuality, and sisterhood to business, relationships, contribution, and creativity, the Sistership Circle podcast introduces a new model of feminine leadership where women get real and vulnerable about it all. Tune in for authentic advice that will empower you to be bold, beautiful, and brilliant as your true self. Hello, sisters. This is going to be probably one of the most real and raw conversations that I'm having to date on this podcast. And that is because I am personally in a very interesting position today. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But today we are talking about the initiation of a divine feminine leader. And oh my goodness, this feels so potent, so powerful today. So let's dive into activating your feminine wisdom, sensual energy, and womb wisdom to access your divine powers. And I am absolutely thrilled that I get to have this juicy conversation with Phoenix Muranetz. Of course, I butchered the last name. Muranetz, right? No,
that's great.
Did I say that wrong?
That's great. Okay.
Phoenix is a women's sensual liberation specialist and the co-founder of the Awakened Women Conference, an inspired creator of the Mythic Self, a practice helping people around the world tap into vastness of their souls. As an initiate in the ancient lineage of Sophia Tantric wisdom, her work connects women back to their embodied wisdom, creative expression, magic, and sensual energy for authentic connection, success, and personal power. After struggling with depression, suicidal tendencies, and disconnection, and resisting her true soul's path most of her early years, she came to embrace the essence of her natural abilities and gifts. Now she works with women all around the world privately through intensive work, private coaching, initiations, and through her yearly conference. As a speaker and performer, her unique prayer performances are best described as transformational and sacred initiatory journeys in the edge where art, creativity, and play meet. And so all of her ways of connecting with her will be on the show notes for this podcast. I am absolutely thrilled that we get to dive in with Phoenix. Welcome, sister. Thanks for being here with me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I just feel very honored to have this time to connect and share and dive into some really potent topics.
So before we started this, we hit record. I was just sharing a little bit about where I'm at today. And I thought, you know what, let's just hit record, because really that's what this podcast is all about. It's about having real and authentic conversations with feminine leaders. And so I woke up this morning and pretty much canceled everything that I had except for this interview. I'm experiencing some severe stomach pains. And I looked up what does stomach mean in Louise Hay's Bible, You Can Heal Your Life book. And it said basically digestion, nourishment, a fear to assimilate the new. And that feels so spot on, because I'm just in this place of really struggling to assimilate being a businesswoman, being a feminine leader, and being a mother. And I know that the two really go hand in hand, but this is intense work to hold a huge vision in the world and to also hold motherhood. And I thought, I cannot cancel this interview. You know, I mean, I need to clear my plate today so I could take care of myself, but there is something that I am going to receive by speaking with Phoenix today. And that is because Phoenix is also a mother. Our babies are 6 months apart at 1 and 18 months. And she is putting on one of the biggest events with her conference coming up. And so she's doing exactly what I'm doing, holding a really, really large vision and holding motherhood as well. So I thought, you know, there's times when you lean in, and this is one of those opportunities of leaning in and listening and receiving the guidance. There's no coincidence that we have this interview today when I'm having this stuff come up with my stomach. So taking a deep breath into that, thank you everyone who's tuning in, because this is, I think, going to be something that you obviously need to hear in this moment. So Phoenix, I'd love to share, just have you start with whatever is wanting to come through you around what I just shared. And what we were saying before is that we are in a very potent time right now. And women are being called to step up and do some really, really deep healing for ourselves to make that impact in the world next few months. So floor's yours. Anything you want to share?
Wow. Yeah, thank you for leading us into that topic and sharing a bit more about what you've been going through, because that is actually, I think, a beautiful characteristic that we're seeing in the divine feminine realm, which is being vulnerable and really coming from a place of truth. And, you know, as we were talking about the divine feminine, and we're talking about what it means to be like a feminine leader, between being able to receive and ask for help. But if we are coming across as, you know, these stoic leaders who are and, you know, leading from old paradigm of like the patriarchal power structure, right? Which is having people on top, you know, having people above. It creates a separation and a hierarchy. And really what we're now moving into is this space of leadership that actually is about being vulnerable, about being open, about asking for what we need and being able to receive it. And so that's been really coming through very strongly in myself as well, and being able to really allow myself to step back and ask myself, you know, where do I need help? Where do I need support? How can I nourish myself and take care of myself? And part of that self-care for women that we're seeing is really allowing ourselves to share and say, hey, I need some support right now. I need some love. I need some sisters around me to really hold me in what I'm going through, because we can't be the lone wolf anymore. It's not about competition. It's not about hierarchy. It's not about this idea of the leader being on top and ahead. It's about standing in our own power. And that means being able to be vulnerable. That means being able to stand in our sovereignty, as well as let others shine in their sovereignty and power. So that's been a huge theme that's been coming through for myself. And I'm seeing this happening in women everywhere. It's kind of like little bubbles bursting or popcorn going off. You know, women are really understanding that they don't need to change anybody else. They don't need to go out into the world and like change the world. It's actually about coming into wholeness. That is the path of the feminine leader. And that's the initiation that I feel like we're coming into right now, is that initiation of ourselves. And through doing that, we actually heal women around the world just through that very act of stepping into taking up space in our womb, you know?
Yes, taking up space in our womb. That is, for me lately, it's been all about taking space, creating space. How do I balance that? How do I actually create space while also going full speed with my life and the fullness of everything that I'm doing, and like, you know, not getting caught up in the to-do list? And, you know, how do we really create that space for ourselves? So I love that it like actually starts with feeling that space in our womb, which is the work that you do. It's brilliant. I love that.
Yeah. And it's such a journey to get to that space of feeling our womb, feeling our pleasure, taking up space. Like, I think about like the diet industry, you know, and how I would say every woman grows up projecting hate onto her womb because she wants a flat stomach, because that is what is expected. And so we project this energy of like disdain, right, onto our bellies, onto our place of power. Like, I just find it so interesting. And so it was such a journey for me to kind of step out of that and start taking up love space and like really standing in that place of power and really feeling love in my womb. And I would say that it's a path for so many of us to really heal a lot of the wounds around that. Would you say that that's been accurate to seen with women?
Just that is exactly what was, it's so fascinating you said that, because last week, just a few days ago, I remember looking in the mirror at my stomach that I'm like, oh, I don't have that stomach that I used to have after having a baby. And it's like, and the ideal woman in me is like, come on, Tanya, it's been 18 months. Like,
yes.
Can't you get rid of that baby fat yet? And I'm just like kind of feeling it and like, what? And it's just interesting that I have been projecting this judgment and this, negative energy towards my womb space. And at the same time, I have these stomach pains. No coincidence, right? It's amazing just how we can project something onto our stomachs and then actually have these aches and pains and wonder why our stomach or our cramps are there. Our stomach cramps or womb cramps are there.
Yeah. And especially too, I mean, you being a woman who is so in the path of doing your work every day, it's the journey never stops in terms of like doing the work, being aware. So I think about how many women are stuck in trying to find out how to step into their power, and they're not even on the path, right? They haven't even made that decision and that choice, and it's the same thing for me. I feel like I've been dedicated full onto my path in healing myself, and yet there's still so much work to be done. There's still centuries and millennia and thousands of years of repression from an old system that has really been detrimental to men and women. So it's really about like purging a lot of the lineage and the ancestral work too as well. So, like well said, right? You're still doing the work, and yet you are a priestess who's so on her path.
Let's talk about that for a minute, because this actually came up for me. So last week, our nanny just split. No notice, just didn't show up. And my husband said, Tanya, there's a lot of people who just aren't awake. And so it's hard sometimes for me I had to bring myself back to understanding and have compassion for what she's going through, for not being her word, for not being accountable, not being responsible. And what you just said of it takes a commitment and a dedication to being on the path. And so can you even imagine women who are trying to find their power but haven't committed to their path? That's a really important piece there. And I'd love to hear from you, because in your bio, it says, that you struggle with depression or suicidal. What was that moment when you chose to be on your path? And I loved how you said it wasn't, sometimes we think, well, it's my purpose, right? Like I need to be doing something. That's my path. But actually what you just described is the path of healing. It's not about who we're being out there, but it's actually about the path within ourselves, right? And that's the initiation, is committing to this path of healing ourselves, because really, truly, that is the only work really to do, is to bring ourselves back to wholeness. So I'd love to hear from you. What was that defining moment for you? Like what actually had you get on the path, make that commitment and that dedication?
Wow. So there's two kind of stories that really stick out. One happened 7 years ago and was very pivotal. That was when I almost died. And that was like my wake up call. And the second one actually happened only a few months ago. And so, when you were talking about, and I get a little emotional because it's very raw, but I think, showing up on the path means making a choice every single day. It's that choice every single day to embrace who we are fully, in love. And it's only from that place that we can then really share that magic in the world, and it's always about coming back into alignment. So the kind of the first wake up call was, happened about 7 years ago when I was in China. And, growing up, I grew up with my grandparents and my mother, and my grandma was very spiritual. She was very tuned in. She had this full, vast library of spiritual books and books on energy. So I grew up being 9 years old, reading about chakra alignments, and I would practice earth meditations and grounding. And I started astral traveling from a very young age when I was 11 or 12. And I kind of just thought it was pretty normal. I would light up my chakras, and I would go journeying, and I'd meet other celestial beings from other dimensions. And then there was a moment where I just decided to shut it all down, because it became too much. I didn't know what to do with this energy. I didn't know what to do with this path. I didn't really have a lot of mentors that I could reach out to help guide me in the development of this. So it wasn't until, as I grew older, I started to really neglect my gifts. I grew up being very involved and immersed in performance art and singing, in spiritual energy and connection to divine. And I really let, the people around me, my teachers, students, other people around me kind of tell me that I couldn't follow my path of being an artist or a singer or a creative performer, that spirituality was, for poor people, that being a healer was, you couldn't make any money. It wasn't a proper profession. And so I really let that shut down my imagination, creativity. And so after high school, I felt lost. I didn't really know what to do with my life. So, in a nutshell, I traveled to China and I was teaching English, and I just felt so disconnected from who I was and what I was here to do. And I had seen so much of the destruction of the environment in China that I actually tried to kill myself. And I almost succeeded, and I actually heard my soul cry out. And that was when I knew that I wasn't alone. And so that kind of woke me up. And from that moment, I decided that I was going to follow my passion and to follow my soul wherever that took me, and get back into creativity and get back into the arts. And so from there, that's when I started going back to art school. That's when I started, really diving into the creative realm. And I still didn't quite trust myself, in following my path and what I really wanted to do. And so I got kind of led astray, and I became an A-type, I am kind of an A-type, but, I got really into goals and achievement and success. And, I was exercising a lot, and I wasn't really taking care of myself, and I became very masculine. I was really very imbalanced. I felt like a man in so many ways. And I didn't feel very in touch with what it meant to be a woman. I didn't really understand what it meant to be a woman. And so on this path, I started to finally come to the understanding that I couldn't really do anything that wasn't in full alignment anymore. And it was this path of full trust. And, I was going to become an urban planner actually about 4 or 5 years ago, which is totally not me, and, but I didn't really know what my creative path looked like. Now, even though I'm just starting to see what that actually means and understand, it's this gift that every day it has a new layer of truth to it. So I know that sounds a little bit ambiguous, but instead of following the path that seemed so laid out, a stable job for the next 30, 40 years, with the government, that didn't feel aligned. I knew that I wouldn't grow. And then just a few months ago, I went to Beloved. I don't know. Have you heard of Beloved in Oregon?
Oh yeah. I really wanted to go, and another time.
Yeah. It was such a potent journey, and it's this beautiful sacred space. And I did a plant journey, plant medicine journey. And in the journey, there was one part of that journey where I went on a walk, and I went down to this river, and there was this beautiful stream with a bridge on it. And I met this woman, and I started up this conversation with a woman. And when we were talking, I asked her what her name was, and she said, "My name is Amy." And I said, "Oh, that's interesting. She has the same birth name as me. I was born with the name Amy." And I said, "Oh, do you have a daughter? Do you have any children?" And she goes, "Oh, I am 33. And I said, "That's an interesting response." I was thinking that. And then I just looked at her and I gave her my full attention, my full presence, and my full love. And in that process, she kind of shape-shifted. It was like this essence came through her, and this like jaguar woman kind of appeared, and this big, beautiful headdress appeared on her. And she kind of breathed, and like her entire aura was just glowing, the fullness of who she was. And she goes, "Thank you, you healed me." And I went on, for the rest of the night and had many more beautiful experiences. And it wasn't until a week ago, retelling the story, that I understood what had happened. And it wasn't that I had healed this random woman. That woman was me. I'm Amy. I'm 33 years old. And I finally gave myself the permission to actually fully see who I am. And it was, I cried. I went through this whole process of like crying and laughing at the same time. And just, it felt like everything made sense, and it's this place of finally seeing who we are. Nobody else can see us until we can fully see ourselves. And that to me is the initiation. That is, until we can fully see our own divine power within ourselves, no one else can really do that for us. Whew. Yeah.
That is the truth. That is the truth. And it's so interesting how we're constantly seeking approval, trying to be seen. And I've just been so agitated lately by Facebook, because it just feels like everyone's shouting for attention. And so I've been very drawn back and not sharing as much as I normally do. And it's interesting that I've had a couple people just in the past couple weeks say, "God, you have to share on Facebook." And I even went to a party on Saturday night, and this woman's like, she's like, "I just want to say that every Facebook post that you write, just I've just been so resistant because I'm just sick of everyone trying to get attention." And what I noticed about that, though, hard, and I'm so hurt that I feel like they don't see me. And so it's like just that simple little reminder for me to just, it's not, and I know this, right? I've known this, but it's like, it's not about them seeing me. What am I not seeing about myself? What am I not embracing? I mean, this is the thing that I'm struggling with and there's this piece around motherhood that I'm not fully embracing, and that I'm resisting. And that is so much of who I am. And what's interesting, the whole thing with the name is right now I'm known as 3 different names. I'm known as Tanya Peluso, my maiden name. I'm known as Tanya Lynn, which I took for business when I got married, which is my first and middle name. And then I'm known as Tanya Kozlowski, which is my husband's name. And I felt this very much like something's got to bring me all together. Like I'm feeling, I haven't been resonating with any of my names. more and more so wanting to, like, what would it look like if I just stepped into Tanya Kozlowski to really create the unity with the family unit, you know, of my husband and my baby, and hopefully second baby. And then I get this email from one of the facilitators in Sistership, and she says, do you mind if I do a name analysis, a numerology name analysis for you?
Oh, nice.
Why not? And she sends me this thing that says, Tanya Peluso, challenging. Like, it's a challenging name, and blah, 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 blah. Tanya Lynn, challenging. And I was like, okay, great. What does Tanya Kozlowski say? And she's like, ding, 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 it's the winner. She's like, it's a 23. It's like the eye of the star of the lion. It's like the name, like it's the numerology name that you should take on. And when you have, and it said in numerology, if you have different names out there, it's actually creating split personality.
Yeah.
And so I said this to Brent, and it's interesting because he's like, I don't know. I don't think you should be that. He's like, you've done enough by just, you know, taking my last name on a marriage certificate. But I don't believe that that's what your name should be out there in the world. I really firmly believe you should be Tanya Lynn. And I'm like, this is just, it feels like this is the inquiry. And I'm so glad that you are here sharing this little piece of wisdom with me. Like, this is the inquiry of, like, can I fully step into the life that I am creating as wife and mother and part of this family unit? And I'm feeling that so strongly right now. Like, what is this that I'm resisting about that is so symbolic of the name? You know, and like, yeah,
and it's these rites of passage too. Like, we don't often have those spaces to be recognized. Like, you know, in so many tribal cultures, there's like a rite and a ritual for new mothers, you know, even after the baby's born, where, you know, they acknowledge you as a mother now, right? And we don't really have those ceremonies, right? Like, you know, what are our major initiations in North America? It's like when you get your period, you know, and it's not even that exciting, you know, where you get your driver's license and then you can drink and you become legal. Like, that's horrible. You know, we have these initiations where, like, you know, you understand your power as a divine creator with your womb, you know, coming into manhood, coming into womanhood, being, you know, getting married, you know, acknowledging childbirth, right? You know, acknowledging stepping into being a woman as a mother, you know, and also too, I think it really changes something within ourselves too, right? Would you agree? I mean, there's obviously that space of, I think, I love that you are so open about what you feel and go through, because there is a lot of, like, I call it like the Instagram persona, you know, like, oh, my life is perfect. You know, I'm a mother. I'm a perfect wife. And it doesn't really show the emotion or the realness and the rawness about actually what women go through, you know? So I really appreciate you being so open and vulnerable. Like, that takes courage as a woman.
Thank you for seeing that. And it's interesting because what has been coming up a lot for me lately is like also this resistance to posting is like, it's like I'm wanting to put out, like, I'm like, well, you know, are people really going to respect me, and are people really gonna want to work with me as a coach and be part of my trainings if I'm so vulnerable? And there's that, it comes up as like, this is my weakness, and I'm going to be seen less than light, or like this, like, frail, you know, like all that comes up for me. And and it's so interesting because when I actually do sit down, I'm just me. And what that is always this piece of vulnerability. And so it's like, And so I have to keep checking that part of me that wants to put up the persona because it just doesn't actually feel right.
Yeah. 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 And you also give the space, like each time, like when I saw your post, you know, like you've done some powerfully potent posts in the realness, and people can feel that, and women can feel that. And, you know, I think that that is divine feminine leadership, because then you give other women the permission, you know, and that's really important, because if we don't have the permission to actually say what we feel truly, like, again, it doesn't matter how free we are, we're still censoring ourselves.
Yeah.
It's like that elephant analogy, you know, where they train the elephants with the chains, and then when they grow up, they take the chain off, but the elephant still thinks that it has have to have anybody else censoring us when we do such a great job at it ourselves.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Wow. I'd love for us to transition into talking about your conference, because what you're providing, and this is perfect, because it's like what you will be providing is the space for women to step into their divine feminine leadership. That's what the conference is all about. And so let's just start with share a little bit about the conference and the intention and when it is, and those details. And then I want to kind of go into we'll do a backstage pass. I want a backstage pass.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, actually, the story of how it came about is kind of interesting, very interesting. So, but essentially the conference is 7 days of women gathering to really step into who they are as an awakened woman. And, you know, the idea behind, I mean, the concept, the actual idea of being an awakened woman is not like, oh, I'm going to transcend, or I'm going to ascend, or, you know, I'm like this spiritually enlightened guru. It's actually just being awakened to our own beauty and to our own love for ourselves, and to it really like tearing away any of the containers or the shackles that we have also placed on ourselves, from being fully liberated and expressing, you know, our voice, in being seen, in feeling pleasure. So the conference actually talks about, you know, health and sexuality. We're going to be talking about womb wisdom, being heard and seen, what it means to be a divine feminine leader, and the whole spectrum in between, and what that looks like too in a modern world, you know, of online business, of being an entrepreneur, being a mother as well, and balancing all of that. So we have some incredible women that are going to be presenting there. We have Eve Ensler, who will be sharing her story in some interviews. We have Baby McGill, who is a beautiful yogi. She's the creative director for Beyonce. She's a beautiful example of a woman who really knows how to balance, you know, a career and also self-practice. We have like Alexi Panos, we have Casey Baker, Elaine Dowdy, like a beautiful spectrum of female leaders in, you know, priestess traditions, in entrepreneurship, in motherhood. And I've been to many different events around the world. I've been to conferences, I've been to transformational festivals, I've been through many medicine journeys. And so we really tried to bring the elements, the beautiful elements from all of those containers, to create the most safe and beautiful container for women to feel safe enough to really let themselves go. And when I say like let themselves go, like feel free to fully express who they are, you know? And so that's the part with all the workshops that we have lined up, as well as that women can then, you know, express themselves through embodiment and dance, or through workshops, and really diving into their soul's purpose and path, getting dressed up and like really embodying their sensual feminine. So we have, I think, over 40 different workshops in all of these different topics as well. And it's all taking place in Bali in November, from November 20th to 27th. So it's a beautiful, luscious container for women to really dive in and connect also in sisterhood, right? Because we're seeing that when we have other women who really support us and hold us, you know, and help us to see ourselves, even if we can't see the beauty in who we are, and support network, you know? So the container is really, I think it's really unlike anything that we're seeing in the world right now. And we're really trying to work with the local community as well. So we have some priestesses coming in to really bless the ceremony along with the divine masculine. We have men who will be journeying along as well with us during the 7 days, and really creating this ceremony. It's a week-long ceremony, really, that involves play, that involves the sacred, that involves the sensual, and afterwards, we're holding the space that these women can then go off into the world and then ignite millions of other women, right? Because that's what we're seeing right now, is that really the divine feminine is awakening around the world in a big and powerful way.
Wow. I mean, it sounds like the perfect, amazing retreat. I mean, seriously, it's just like, oh my God, I just feel myself like pulled into it. So I'd love to hear, like, how did this come about, and you said that there was a magical story, and so this is the second one. You did it last year?
No, so this is actually the first annual conference, and I would say for probably the past 7 years, I've really been called to create like an eco village or an eco community. You know, and it'd been in the back of my mind. And so, you know, when I was going to architecture school and urban planning, you know, I did a lot of my thesis around like shared communal spaces, around collective living. I lived, you know, in collective houses for 4 or 5 years. I was really interested in like, what does it look like to live in new forms of community, right? Because we really need community and tribe. But something didn't quite feel aligned. And for the last 2 years, I put on my vision board the temple. And I didn't really understand what that meant, you know, like, what does the temple mean? But I just felt called to put the temple on my vision boards. And it had like, you know, these hands with a seedling coming out. And finally it clicked last year when I was pregnant, and I was about, I guess, 6 months pregnant. And I'd gone to an event, or no, I think my baby was about a year. No, she'd just been born, actually. So she's about a month old, her named Melissa Mackey. And it was this beautiful combination of like business and spirituality, you know, entrepreneurship and the divine feminine. And after her event, I contacted her and I said, you know, I got this download from Spirit that said that we need to do something like this, but on a bigger, more global scale. And we need to use the prophets to create a divine feminine temple, a temple devoted to the feminine wisdom. And so we kind of talked back and forth about what that would look like. And when the idea came about, I think the very next day, a woman said to me, I hadn't even told her about this, but she said, you know, you need to do an event in Bali. That is kind of like that event that you told me about that you went to, and, you know, have like fire performers and make it like a festival, but be in Bali. And, and so as I was, you know, I was pretty shocked and like, what? Like, I didn't even tell this woman, you know, about this idea. So to me, that was like affirmation from divine that like, yes, you've heard this call. Yes, it is time. Yes, you are ready. Yes, women are ready. And it is time for the temples to come back in the world, devoted to the divine feminine. And so as it's kind of come along, there's been a lot of women that have been sending me information about Bali as being a very activated portal in the world for the divine feminine. I had no idea. I've never been to Bali. I just listened, you know. And so on this journey, it's really called me to stretch myself, you know. But what I'm seeing is that it's also asking me to open myself more and more in order for other women to step through this portal. And what Spirit has shown me is that a very powerful portal on the planet will be opened in November for the divine feminine wisdom to come through. And I don't think it's any coincidence that the elections are happening in the States in November. I don't think it's any coincidence that that there's so many other women's conferences and events happening, you know, in that month period from October to November. And it's really calling on us to kind of step through the fire of our own fear and really like come into who we are as women in this planet right now, because our voices are needed. And they're not needed in the small way. They're needed in like the fullness of who we are. And it, you know, our souls are calling on us to really see us for who we are. And so that's why we're like, okay, priestesses, okay, healers, like it's time, you know, it's really, really time. It's time to step out of the small stories, because we are infinite. We are these expressions of creation. And, you know, as being half of the world's most oppressed for centuries and centuries, it's like now time to like let go of that story. And that is what I'm seeing. It's like, it's time to let go of the story of being repressed, of being shackled, of being silenced. And it's time for us to use our voices in the world.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Wow. So first of all, I just want to bow down to you for listening, for taking the leap and walking through the fire of fear. I love that. And I'm sure that it's bringing up all your stuff, because this is such a massive undertaking. And so I love for you of what because this is, you're demonstrating what it looks like for a woman to just like full on follow her vision. And so many women get stopped and they think it's too big and they back down and they get stuck in that fear and they get consumed by it, and it just stops them in their tracks. And here you are putting it out there in a major way, gotten some huge players on board. And I'm sure your stuff's coming out. So anything you want to share around that?
Yeah. So the stuff never stops coming up, I think. Like it never really stops. And anyone who says that they got their shit figured out, probably isn't ready to admit that their stuff is still coming up, because every day I'm finding like I'm really being called to like breathe and process and really come back to living my medicine every single day. So, you know, if I stop my self-care practices for one day, you know, if I get out of alignment, I actually, the more that I come into my power, the more I have to like stay focused. So whether that's through dance every day, you know, through just getting sensual and like feeling into who, you know, into my power, and like getting out of my head and into my heart. That's a huge one, because this makes so many stories up, right? About, you know, our smallness, about our worthiness, getting connected back to nature. So yeah, my stuff's been coming up big time. Like, oh, I'm not ready to do this. Oh, this is going to fail. Oh, you know, every single day there's always new stories that come up, and I keep on having to get reminded of who I really am. So actually, I'm going to be debuting a powerful performance that really scares the shit out of me, and it excites me and it lights me up, you know. And it's kind of like, if I could describe it, it's like a performance that brings the fierceness of Beyonce with the sacredness of like you know, Deepak Chopra, and just, you know, like this performance that's really been building up inside of me for the last 30 years. You know, using music, using ceremony and performance and engagement, right? Really bringing us together, you know, and actually having a group ceremony in that way. So yeah, I think that if we're following that path, it's calling on us to step through our fear in every single way. And I know that you are doing that every single day as well, right? Like, you know, your fears are going to come up and be placed in front of you. And then we have to really feel them in order to let them dissolve, right?
Well, I can, yeah, I can relate.
Yeah.
And specifically around this prayer performance here. So I just want to share this quick little story of, there was, I put on this, this performance called Rational Lies, the lies that we tell ourselves. And so I brought together some people, and we were each going to do a 10-minute thing. And I knew that I had to do this, but every single thought in my head was screaming, this is like, like it was just so scary, and everything possibly that could go wrong went wrong. People, like, I don't know how many people said they were going to be part of it and flaked out, including someone at the last minute. There was just like so much resistance to everyone who was in it. I mean, it was just like, heavy, heavy, heavy. And, you know, are we even going to get people to show up? Like all of that. And yet I knew that I had to do this piece, and my piece was around overcoming my resistance to motherhood. No coincidence. The theme of the show today. And, so it was a Saturday night, Friday night dress rehearsal. I said, there's a chance I'm pregnant. And it was 3 months into my relationship. So it was like, wow, get on stage. And I'm doing this whole performance. And at the end, I'm like, I'm ready. Like, I'm ready. And a couple of people said that they felt energetically like someone was pregnant, like on the show or whatever. Sure enough, Tuesday, I take the test and I'm pregnant. And it was like, oh, that's why I had to literally go through that whole process. And it was like, you know, it was this rite of passage into conceiving. And so that's so interesting because you put something so big at stake for this conference, like there's something personal that you're putting out there, right? In this prayer performance. And it's like your soul has to do this. There's just no way around it. Yeah. And that, I think sometimes when we put something that big at stake and we can't even fully understand it, draws us and continues to draw us forward into it. And that's what holds our commitment, you know?
Yeah.
So that's up to you. I know what that's like.
Oh, I so see you, sister. And like, it's interesting too, how you created your own rite of passage too, as well, in embracing your fears and actually inviting people to witness you in that, you know, and that is, it is a leap of faith to actually put your trust that people will show up and witness you, right? Like that is the most vulnerable thing that you can do, right? Is to actually allow people inside to see who you are, what you're going through, you know, and that is the beauty of feminine medicine, of feminine wisdom, you know, and I see that men are really being called now, like through that divine masculine, to also be seen and witnessed in their own, like, layering and dissolving of the masks of patriarchy, you know, of having to be aggressive and competitive, and actually stepping into what does the divine masculine actually look like, and going through their own inquiry into that. And I'm sure that you've seen that a lot with your partnership, right? With your partner, and, you know, having him show up as that divine masculine to hold you, right? To be that steady container to allow you to be wild and free and like, you know, just like let loose in that.
Yeah. What I'm present to right now is, last month was the first month that we tried to conceive our second child, and it was a no-go. And I feel like all this has been coming up. There's something there that I'm searching for, of that next portal. It feels like, right? And so there's something I'm having it, like, it's the name, it's what's going on with my stomach. Like, there's these pieces that, this feels like the month of healing for me. And there's some kind of initiation. There's some new rite of passage. And I don't know what that is, but I'm in that inquiry right now as we're speaking of, you know, these souls that are coming in. We have to get rid of the blocks to allow them to come through, right? And it's not just as easy as, oh, just have sex, you know, like there's so many elements that we have to put into place, and that we need to do some work. And I know so many women who are trying to get pregnant and are not. And so it's like, what is that one thing that's blocking you from having that? and what's the healing that needs to take place, and it's different for each of us. So what I'm present to is like these rite of passages and these initiations and the witnessing by community to hold you as you step through and create that portal. So thank you for your contribution today.
Yeah. And sending you and your partner and your baby lots of support that everything unfolds as beautifully as it can, you know?
And there's, right on cue, there's yours.
Well, thank you so much for having me here today. And I'm just so holding so much love for all of the women that are going through their own initiations as we speak right now. And so I would love to just open up, if there are any women that are feeling called to ask for support. I'm totally open for, free half-an-hour sessions with women just to hold them and provide any insight or guidance in terms of their own initiatory path through the divine feminine. So they can always email me at phoenix@awconference.org, and I would be happy to gift them with a free session.
Great. And if women are feeling the call to go to Bali, they go to awconference.org for tickets.
Yeah.
Great.
And we actually just, we're announcing, I think today, that we have our live stream partner who's going to be live streaming the conference. So we have tickets going on sale for $47, which will be happening in the next couple of days. So they can also access the conference that way.
Very cool. Very cool. And so all of those links and you can find in the show notes for the show if you're listening and tuning in and want a direct link. Thank you so much, Phoenix. This was such a...
Thank you, sister.
It was medicine today. So I appreciate you, and thank you for just being who you are and being on this path. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mama, for being so real and showing up as the divine feminine leader that you are. Thank you.
Thank you.